if somebody's out here looking in the window right now, I might feel threatened. Sarvan might feel turned on. You might feel aggressive. You might feel scared. You know, we'd have reactions depending on our history. So what's really important when you start to work sobriety and being healthy, even if you don't do it right, it's important to think it right. So Fiona does behavior X. My response is nothing about Fiona's behavior. My response is about whatever I'm doing with it. Somebody else might have a sense of humor with it, blah, blah, blah. Know what's really funny about that is, even you, your own self, somebody does behavior X different days, you have a different reaction to it. You know, so it's so crazy we make these things solidified when we're triggered, but they make very dysfunctional relationships and they make very dysfunctional business partners. So that has to be worked all the time. You know, what he's saying is more about him than it is about me. Let's say, I had a client in London the other day, tone of voice of his wife. You know, she's negative and she cuts him off and he says, I need to tell you something really important. She goes, okay, make it fast. And he just can't stand that, right? So, I mean, I, of course, would never mind if somebody said make it fast. I would really think that was a good thing to say to me if I was saying something important. If they were really, really slow, I would think that was really a bad thing. So it's clear that it's about how we prefer it and not about the person, right? So, I mean, I'm ruthless with him, you know. I said, okay, does thinking that, they're trying to get a divorce, so it even makes it more tricky. Does thinking that about her make you weak or strong? Weak or strong? Weak. I said, well, pathetic even. Okay, weak. I go, now, if you were a man, he hates that. He hates all these employees and stuff. If you were a man, how would you say that to me? And then he thinks of a way some kind of guy would say it. So, you need to correct your thinking around boundaries. You know, like, the external's the external, and that comes second, but really need to even start thinking, you need to start correcting how you think about it. He goes, well, I don't say that out loud. I go, but you think about it to yourself like that. So how you think about it to yourself is what you're repeating over and over and over and over to yourself. She shouldn't talk to me like that. She shouldn't, you know? So, one of the heart and souls of codependence is blaming. So we call it the bony finger, right? And part of recovery is like to whip that bony finger, you know? She did that, she did that, she did that, and whip it around, you know? I'm having trouble with this. So that means you have to give up being a victim. And that's really hard for people. So I'll say again, does, you know, seeing it this way, does that make you weak or does that make you strong? Weak. Well, is that how you want to walk around all week? You know, is that how you want to live your life, like a, you know, a weak, pathetic piece of nothing? And is that how you want your partner to see you, a weak, pathetic piece of nothing? And you want your partner to feel sorry for you so they shape up their behavior? Is that the kind of relationship you want to be in? With anybody, with a workmate, with anybody. So it's a question you can ask yourself. Does this make me strong or weak? But I remember, this is not effortless. This is not an awareness game. This is like a diligence game. And I remember, you know, like doing it over and over and over until it's rote. Now I actually think this way. Doesn't mean I don't get pissed off at people. You know, but I think this way. I think I'm having trouble with this. I'm having trouble with the way that you do that. It doesn't mean anything about the way you do it. It means I'm having trouble. And then I learn capacity from my own unease. And that's a lot of maturity. You know, you learn capacity for your own unease. You know, I remember saying to some woman, okay, if we change your partner, and we change your neighbors, and we change your kids, then your life will be good. And she goes, yeah, As if I finally understood her. She didn't even get it. And I said to her finally, I said, don't you think that would be a lot of work? Look at the effort involved in deciding to do that, and you would still be the same at the end of it. So notice that stuff. I remember once a client threw a cushion at me, and she said to me, she got in the corner of my office, threw a cushion at me, and she goes, Jesse, I'll be as miserable as long as I goddamn well please. And I said, well, that's a good way to run your life. You want to pay me to be as miserable as you please. And okay, how long you want to be miserable for? Let's make a contract. You want to be miserable for 3 months, 4 months, or 5 months? Let's decide how long you want to be miserable for. And let's decide now when you want to be tired of being miserable. 6 months? You can have as long as you want. 6 months? Okay, we'll do misery 6 months, okay? Then after we do the misery for 6 months, what do you think you'll have to look at? Jeez, people want. They want their little territory of misery. And who's that hurting doing 6 months of misery? Really and true, who's that hurting? I deserve 6 months of misery. This is a difficult thing. Oh, okay. You earned 6 months of misery. I grant you 6 months of misery. We fight for this stuff. We really do. So part of it's really getting honest. And part of it in here is deciding, I don't want to fight for being miserable. Like, really, I don't want to fight for the victim position. It's a moderation issue anyway, bully victim. But I don't want to fight for the victim stance. So you decide some things. And you have to, with this stuff, you work your ass off every day because a lot of it is just total habits. And if you don't allow yourself to do some things, like if you don't allow yourself after tonight to do a victim stance, at least without knowing it's sick. You might know it's sick and let yourself have it for a while. I know I've just been in California visiting my mother, and my mother's quite a hellion, as a lot of you know. And if I don't do a victim stance with her, it means I have to stand up to her. So a lot of times standing up to her is something I don't want to do because it feels like getting it up. It feels like a lot of energy. So I can walk in after driving to visit her and she flicks on the TV and watches it. So if I don't want to do a victim stance, I have to stand up to her. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I have to do something I do not want to do. Like, Mom, if you don't shut off the TV, I'm leaving. And then she watches it, and then I have to leave after just driving an hour to go see her, and I go by. I did that like 20 times in a row, and now she flicks the TV off when I come in. But it took like 20 times in a row, like 20 hours of driving, and 20 hours of driving back. But, you have to be utterly consistent. Does that make sense? I'd rather go, I came all that way. Sometimes when I fly in from Australia and she does that shit, I used to just fall apart. I'd fly in from Australia, she wouldn't meet me at the airport, and then she wouldn't talk to me at lunch or nothing. Oh, great, this is really good. But once I gave up being the victim, I just started standing up to her. Does that make sense? Her behavior didn't have to change. It happened to change because I was so consistent, but it didn't have to change. And I do that even when she mouths off. Like, she'll say, you don't even know what being a daughter is. And I'll say, stop right there. You really want to have that fight if I'm a bad daughter or if you're a bad mother? Because I tell you, Mom, we go into this fight, I'm going to win. You want to have that now? Is this what you want to do with our day? Because no matter what, I'm going to win. And she goes, let's get something to eat. I was thinking, blah, 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 as if she never even said it. And I thought, okay, cool, I was thinking, blah, we'll just join her, you don't have to like, very good. There's a rule in codependence and addiction, here's another rule. 3 strikes and you're out. You're not allowed to say something more than 3 times. That's in a year. You can't say you didn't do the dishes, then 6 months later you didn't do the dishes. You need to bring it to resolution. So you're not allowed to go chip, 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 nag, 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 erosion, 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 erosion. Does that make sense? It's manipulative. We'll get to control and manipulation tomorrow. But what that does, it kills you. It totally kills you. You think you're going to die through this rule, you know. It makes you, after 3 times, if I'm not allowed to bring this up, you'd be surprised how couples and parents are really happy with repetitive fights. You know, you had fight 101, fight 203, fight 506, I don't like you flirting with that girl. You know, fight 907, and they're just like, you know, you just pull it down and it's a repetitive fight. You could put 2 tape recorders together and they have to fight. You don't do the dishes, I mow the lawn, you know. So you're not allowed to have repetitive fights, you're not allowed to say it more than 3 times. So what it does is it makes you bring it to resolution. And I thought this was a crazy thing, but then I tried it. People call me up thinking they're going to die, and I say, you never died from shutting your mouth. You know, you have to shut your mouth. And so I used to do it in the car, and I used to do it really loud so people would know I shut my mouth. Just to say, I have a lot to say, but I'm not. But it was still better than doing a repetitive fight. Does that make sense? And you shut your mouth and breathe. But what it does, let's say I let you drive my car and you don't let me have any input into the parking. So I'm not allowed to bitch about that. Well, it doesn't take me long before I decide you can't drive my car. Does that make sense? Because the momentum that you get from being not allowed to say it is outstanding. It's like it builds the energy so you actually can do resolution. It's unbelievable. You think you're going to die, but you get a lot of energy.
Could you do an example about the dishes?
Yeah, Joss has a good example about this. She's got a housemaid that never does the dishes, and I said, this guy doesn't do the dishes. And Joss goes, that guy's never going to do the dishes. He can put in energy for a cleaner. So he goes, I would never expect him to do the dishes, be more energy than it's worth to make him do the dishes. So then he just thought of something else. If you're not allowed to moan and groan about it, you'd be surprised. You
find another way.
You find another way. Besides being resentful. So a couple of examples. Resentment is big for codependence. Resentment. Addicts just act really bad. Codependents like die of being a pussy pimple, you know, they die of resentment. Advice. Advice is the sunny side of control.